Krishnajan, could you just check your
We are
chat?
recording. Yeah, we are recording. We
Yeah.
are live. Okay, Arun, give us a thumbs up if you're live. Yes, we can't see your thumb, but yes, we're starting. All right. Welcome everyone to the Great Trial of Canada. So we are with Dianne Whelan joining us all the way from Canada, and she's on her adventure, and we're very happy to have her with us. We're doing this with Decathlon and Rotaract as well as MD College together. It's a fantastic event where we are able to share experiences of adventure when we are all locked up inside our homes. So Bhagya, if you had to say something, we can have you
Yes,
address. Yeah.
I would just like to introduce Dianne.
Yes.
So, guys, Dianne is one wonderful personality that you all definitely should be listening to. I mean, there's so much of wisdom, thought, adventure, and she's a very well-known, award-winning filmmaker. Especially a lot of her movies, like 40 Days at Everest Base Camp, The Land, which narrates about her journey in the Arctic region. And at present, she's ongoing on a trail since almost 5.5 years, where she's covering 24,000 kilometers by trekking or bicycling or paddling through the Arctic, Atlantic, and Pacific Oceans. So she's been through a lot of adventures. She's seen life with a different perspective. And yes, as she always says, in search of wisdom. So, welcome, Dianne, to this wonderful session. We are, in fact, privileged to have you amongst us. And as he rightly mentioned, in collaboration with Roadtrack 3190, and MD College and Decathlon, all of us, we are very pleased and humbled to listen to your session. So over to you, Dianne.
Oh, thank you very much, Bags. As I said, ever since I met you 10 years ago on Everest, I knew that our journey was we would be revisiting each other and seeing each other again. So it's a great honor for me this morning to be here as a part of this a part of this event. At this point, what I thought I would do today is share a little bit about my career, what I do and why I do it, because as most of you know, if you're also adventurers, the first question after what is usually why. Why are you doing this 24,000 kilometer journey? So is it an appropriate time for me just to launch into that, into this discussion?
Yes, Diane, we're all set.
Yeah. Okay. So the question for why is I do make adventure films. I'm going to pull up my presentation in a few minutes where I'll show a few slides of photographs and a video clip. There are hundreds and hundreds of photographs. If you want to see more on my Instagram accounts, which I know they've listed, but it's at 500 Days in the Wild and at Dianne Whelan Photos on Instagram. You'll be able to see hundreds and hundreds of photos from the last, even thousands from the last 5 years on the trail. So I make adventure films, and that makes it kind of sexy for people. I mean, I've been to the world's highest mountain, and I've been to one of the most northern coastlines in the world. And now I'm on the longest trail in the world. But in addition to making adventure films, what I'm really interested in and what compels me as a storyteller to come out here to do these journeys is I'm definitely a meaning seeker. You know, as Reinhold Messner said, I climb high to go deep inside. So for me, these journeys are all about learning about myself. First and foremost, I always say the great thing about these kinds of adventures is even if my films bomb, which I've been fortunate, my films have done very well, but even if they bombed, there's no failure because I've gone out and I've had this amazing experience where I've learned about myself and I've learned about other people. So what really drives me to the stories that I choose is that they're all a weave of traditional indigenous wisdom and science and technology. There's no doubt that we can all know of the accolades of the science and technology of the last 150 years. There's a lot of amazing things that have come out of that, including here we are on our laptops and phones and communicating with each other through video, you know, across hundreds of thousands of miles. But it's come at a cost, come at an ecological cost to the world. So what fascinates me are stories where we see traditional wisdom and science and technology working together to take people through danger to safety. So I'm going to bring up the presentation now, and we'll show you some story here. Okay. Get the glasses on and action. Here we go. Oops, sorry. Let's start right here. And will I be able to do this? Perfect. So normally when you would see me, this is what I would look like for the last 5 years. This tent has been my home. On this image, I'm paddling a river. So this 24,000 kilometer trail, which is billing itself as the longest trail in the world, was opened up in 2017 in Canada. I started it 2 years before it officially opened because as a storyteller, I wanted to be one of the first people to ever do this trail. And I am the first person to have ever done the trail, including all the land trails and water trails. Out of the 24,000 kilometer trail, 7,000 kilometers of it is paddling. And this particular photo you see of me sitting in front of my tent is a scene from paddling last summer. Last summer, I paddled with my partner. Actually, most of the journey I've done on my own for the first 3.5 years. Now that I've been gone away from home for so long, a lot of my friends are coming out for 2 weeks, 3 weeks at a time and helping me out so that I can finish before I retire at this station they came. So right now where I'm sitting is inside a support vehicle. I'm in this support vehicle for 2 reasons, one of which is I would not be able to be here talking to you today. So I'm patched into solar panels on the roof for power. I'm using a cell phone as a hotspot in order to communicate with you. Because of the pandemic, in order for me to stay on the trail, I had to eliminate the need to go into any communities to resupply for water or food. So my partner is driving the support vehicle, and whenever the trail meets a road, we can connect. And some of the trail is in fact dirt roads, and some of it's out in the wild in the wilderness. It's a combination. The trail is made up of 487 different trails that have all been stitched together. Some of them are ancient trails, like when I'm paddling on the water, I'm following trails that people have used on this land for thousands of years. Before there was a Canada, before there was the United States, before there was a Mexico, this continent was called Turtle Island by the indigenous people who lived here for thousands of years. So part of what I'm doing, my government opened up, the Canadian government conceptualized of this trail across this country to celebrate Canada's 150th birthday. And I'm very happy to be a Canadian. I know I'm very fortunate to be a Canadian. But I also know that people have lived here for thousands of years before my country was created. So part of the purpose of this journey as a storyteller was to have this, is to make an adventure film, but it's also to search for a more inclusive story, a story that perhaps is a little bit more honest in terms of the origins of this land. And part of what fascinates me too is that this trail connects 3 oceans. And so I thought as a storyteller, it's a perfect metaphor for what connects us all, not what makes us all different. I always like to tell people that when you look at the earth from outer space, we don't see boundaries, we just see land and water. And, if we maybe focused more on what we share than what makes us different, it might be a different place. And what we all need is clean air, clean water, and clean food. So as a storyteller, that is part of the reasons, those are kind of the backdrop to why I've gone on this journey. This particular photo that you're seeing now is from my journey up into the high Arctic. So like I mentioned, before I came on this trail, I made other films and wrote other books. And this particular one is from a 2,000 kilometer journey I did along one of the most northern coastlines in the world. If you look at an atlas, it's up near Greenland and Ellesmere Island. We navigated 2,000 kilometers of that. And I traveled it with 5 Inuit men and 2 Canadian Army men. And it was what they call a sovereignty patrol. It was the high Arctic. Nobody lives there. So every year the Canadian government sends up some people to kind of take a peek around, make sure, it's like, I guess in international law, in order to claim land as yours, you have to go up and step on it. So we went up, and I embedded myself as a filmmaker on this journey. And this is a perfect example of what I'm talking about in terms of science and technology. There's the name of the film, This Land. And there we are camping out on the frozen Arctic Ocean. We're about 300 kilometers from the North Pole in this image. And there's another image from it. So one of the things that draws me to it is this interplay, like I said, of traditional knowledge and science and technology. And this photo is an Inuit man who is on top of an iceberg in the frozen Arctic Ocean. So when you're out on this kind of journey, where do you get your drinking water? Well, the Inuit know. They climb these old icebergs and they look for dark blue ice. And then they melt that ice is old ice, and a lot of the salt water from the ocean has been dissolved from it. And so he would chip off this dark blue ice, bring it back down to camp, and that's what we would boil for drinking water. This is a perfect example of what I'm talking about in terms of traditional knowledge with the science and technology. You know, we had GPS, we had satellite phones, but we also utilized knowledge that was thousands of years old in order to travel safely through the north. When we were up near the North Pole on this particular journey, we hit a hurricane. It was -80, complete whiteout. And at that point, all that high technology failed us. All those sat phones, all of those GPSs, because they run on batteries, and batteries freeze in the cold. And so we needed the traditional knowledge of the Inuit elders to help us navigate and set up a safe camp and figure out where we were and take us to safety. And the same thing I could say would be true of Everest Space Camp and Mount Everest, in that nobody gets up, and Bags can tell you this too, nobody gets up Everest without Sherpa people. And the Sherpas are the indigenous people of the Nepal region and Tibet region. They still have a very sacred connection to the mountain. But they also have a very thorough understanding of ice and what it takes to navigate up the mountain safely, as well as a physical capacity by just being born into the higher altitudes. And so once again, we have this interplay of people with the latest in climbing gear and Gore-Tex and everything else, mixed with traditional wisdom of the people who live in the region. And we need them both to work together in order to get people safely to the top and safely to the bottom. So after I came back from Everest on making my last film, the world has sort of stopped making sense to me. There was that oil rig off the coast of in Florida that was like hemorrhaging oil all over the ocean for 6 months. It just seems like whales are being found with like car parts in their bellies, and fish are contaminated with mercury. And it was like I said, for all the great things that science and technology are doing for us, it's coming at a great cost, which is the destruction of our ecology. So one of the things I wanted to do while I crossed this great trail was to connect to people, maybe everything we need to know we have forgotten. So I wanted to go in quest of some lost wisdom. And so that's what really in my heart kind of inspired me to go out. And when I embarked on this journey, about 2 years into it, I was camping on the shores of a lake called Lake Superior, which is one of the largest lakes in the world, freshwater lakes in the world. And one morning I woke up to hearing just the drumming of a distant drum. And I followed it a little trail, and I came upon a clearing where there was an Ojibwe gathering. And in this gathering, they were putting up a teepee, and they were putting up a sweat lodge, and they were going to do ceremony for a week. And I thought, wow, wouldn't it be amazing if I could film and interview these people? So I went over to them very shyly. As you know, I have a lot of respect for elders. And so I approached them very shyly, and I asked them, I said, is it okay if I, interview you for the film? And they said, well, we're kind of busy right now setting up the teepee and preparing for our ceremonies for the week. So why don't you have a little seat over there and then we'll call you over. So I waited for a couple of hours and eventually I got called over, and one of the elders said to me, "Why are you on this journey?" Everybody was quiet, waiting for my answer. And I was like, I wanted to sound smart, you know. And I just said, "Oh, well, the world stopped making sense to me." And he kind of shakes his head and nods. And then it's quiet again. And then he says to me, "Why are you here?" And I said, "Because I'm following my heart." And then he said, "Okay, set up your tent. You're going to spend the week with us." And those are the kind of exchanges that I was seeking to find. And so in that week that I spent with the Ojibwe, every morning they get up at 4:30 in the morning and they go into the teepee and they would say their morning prayers. And that include basically started with a drum, playing a drum. And then after they do the drumming, they would pass a feather around the fire in the teepee. And each person had to sort of speak from their heart about what it was that they were searching for. And once again, I was very nervous because I don't have an answer. Anyway, so the feather comes to me and I'm holding it. And again, I'm in my mind and because I want to sound smart. And, you know, you want people to like you. You want people to accept you. So I'm thinking, oh, what am I going to ask for? What am I going to ask for? So I ask for strength. I say, I'm going to ask for strength to continue on this very long and arduous journey, and that I can stay with my heart and not, you know, sell out along the way. And I pass the feather on, and the elder in the circle looks at me and he says, "Oh, don't ask for strength. If you ask for strength, you're going to keep getting tested. Ask for understanding." So that's been a very pivotal lesson on this journey, and that is ask for understanding. And I guess that's part of what I'm doing. I'm going to show you now a map of the trail. It's going to go by very quickly, but then I'll show you another one after that freezes it. So I started in Newfoundland. That's where the little line started. The green line as it crosses is the land trail. Whenever you see water is the blue line, it's the water trail. That blue line going all the way up to the north was a 4,000 kilometer paddle that we did last summer up to the Arctic Ocean. And now I'm on the final 2,500, 2,600 kilometers of land trail. And then the trail, when the trail ends in Vancouver on the Pacific side, on the left side of that map, it's a 300 kilometer paddle on the ocean in the Salish Sea. And then that'll be the end of the journey. Before, as I was mentioning, before North America was divided into Canada, the United States, and Mexico, it was called Turtle Island by the indigenous people who lived here. So that was part of what also drew me to this trail, was that it connected three oceans and that it symbolically reflected something older than the age of my country. Here's another map. What I did on this one was just simply to show you with these arrows where I started, where the paddle went up to in the Arctic, but also where I am right now on that green line. And I'm heading south to finish by October, give or take, 2020. Okay, right now I'm going to try to show you a trailer before we start talking about 500 Days in the Wild, which is actually now 5 years. I'm on my 5th year. So I like to joke, the only thing I got right was the 5. I'm going to try to show you a trailer. I know that you are going to be provided with the links so you can see this trailer as well as some of my other film trailers, but I think it says more in 2 minutes in the video than I can say in words. And then I'll move into a discussion about it. Oops. If I can make it work. Here we go. Bear with me.
When I left on this journey, I felt like we used to live in a society and now we live in an economy, and it lost all its meaning for me.
Is this what you call a midlife crisis? $50.
I left Newfoundland in 2015 on a 24,000 kilometer journey across this land. I was looking for wisdom, but I didn't know I was going to find that wisdom in First Nation communities and in the old way of the relationship to the earth.
The eye of science and the eye of indigenous knowledge, they need to work together in order to get a more clear picture of the ecosystem. It goes back to that same question you're asking, is what have we forgotten? We've forgotten this, because if you listen to the land, she speaks to you. There are dangers out there.
Hold on, I got the bear spray. Sometimes you just need a helping hand, eh? We're in this together. Two little fragile spirits.
Wonder what all the other 50-year-old women are doing today.
So there you go. That's in a 2 minutes, a good snapshot of the journey that I'm on so far. And there are a lot of challenges. Obviously, it's never been done before, so I don't have a book that I can follow. I have a map, and that's it. And sometimes there's a trail, and sometimes I'm bushwhacking it and I'm cutting the trail. Some of these trails date back to fur trader days. Some of these trails date back to, yeah, like I said, especially on the paddles, their journey, their trails that were used thousands of years ago by indigenous people here. Some of the trails are old rail lines that are about 200 years old. Some of these trails are, they've been walked for a long time. So it's always different. And you know, the stories are embedded in the landscape too. Like we might have forgotten things, but you know, for instance, going through this area here, there used to be a lot of family farms in this region, and now it's a lot of industrial farms. So a lot of old farmhouses are sitting and abandoned. So there's a lot of ghosts still from the past that are woven into the landscape, which as a storyteller really draws me to this journey as well. On this journey, I like to say that there are misadventures and profound exchanges. This image right here, it's not normally what you would see, a canoe in the snow, but this happened while I was paddling 2 years ago. I had a 1,200 kilometer paddle with 200 portages through a very remote section of Canada. It's called Path of the Paddle. And while I was out there, I woke up in the morning and the water had all turned to ice. So I had to extract myself, which meant basically setting up a base camp and cutting a trail out of the bush for 12K in order to get out of there, because I was going to have to wait until things melted before I could resume my journey. So those are what we call misadventures. And after I got out, there was a lot of media that was like, oh my God, woman filmmaker trapped in the bush, you know, and they wanted to interview me. And it was really funny because they all wanted me to, you know, get on. They're like, weren't you scared? And it's like, no, I wasn't scared, because like I was prepared, even though it was an unfortunate situation. I had food for 5 weeks, you know, and a friend of mine was paddling with me on this section. So we just basically set up a tent in the snow, built a little fire pit, and every day we got up and we went and chopped our trail, and then we came back and took a lot, you know, just patiently kind of worked our way out of there. We had the gear, we had the knowledge that we needed in order to stay alive. So it wasn't frightening at all. It was just a misadventure. And I think that's the trick to these kinds of, and that's part of the allure, I think, then what draws all of us to these kinds of journeys is testing ourselves, testing our limits, testing our abilities. And, you know, I always say solitude reveals what a mirror cannot. So when you're out there and you're having to face these things, are you facing them with grace? Are you facing them being calm and grounded, or are you manic and are you spinning around? Because if you are, that's going to get you killed. You really got to find your grounding. You've really got to find your core, and you got to just kind of know how to just stay calm. No matter what happens, you've got to be able to stay calm. And these journeys, these physical experiences, whether you're climbing Everest or you're dragging yourself across this trail like I am, that's the gift of what they give us, because by pushing our limits of what we think we can achieve, we take this into our life. We take it into our relationships. We take this into our jobs. We take this understanding of ourselves into everything, every other aspect of our lives. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of my profound exchanges and have been from the Indigenous people of Canada. With colonization, it's kind of a shameful chapter of Canada's history, as well as many other countries in the world, in terms of how Indigenous people were treated. This, you know, we came, we were welcomed. They had a very different cosmology, a very different understanding of the world. They lived with the earth, not upon the earth, and they still do. And they've always been very interested in protecting the water and the land. They didn't have private property. There was no concept of private property. Everybody shared everything. It was a very different world. But one of the things now that I feel is that some of this traditional wisdom is what we need to guide the science. I always say to people, where people always, you know, where do you find purpose? Well, you don't find purpose in your mind. You know, you find purpose in your heart. So we need the mind to work for the heart, not the heart to work for the mind. And I think technology, again, science and technology are amazing, and they bring many gifts, but basically they're the new kid on the block. And so how do we guide this technology? You know, for instance, you know, with nuclear power, you can create power and you can supply hydro to all millions of people. You can also destroy the planet. So these technologies have a shadow and they have a light, you know. So what is the wisdom that's going to guide these things? And that's where I find a lot of hope has been in spending time with Indigenous elders and learning the traditional relationship that they had with the earth. For instance, they would never make a decision without thinking about 7 generations ahead of them, 7 generations of the unborn. Now, if you could sit with that concept for a minute, imagine how different the world would be. You know, we would never be able to build a pulp mill on a river to create 500 jobs for 50 years if we destroyed the river for 200,000 years with our pollution, because we need water. Water is actually more expensive than oil now. When you go buy a bottle of water, you're paying more than you are for a liter of water, oil in Canada. Well, we don't owe the future an economy. We owe the future air to breathe and water to drink. And anyway, I get a lot of where I find that this isn't these aren't new revelations. People have known this for a long time, and where I've been really inspired and where I'm learning a lot and where I'm finding my hope is in learning this traditional knowledge of the Indigenous ancestors of this land. This is me filming, and this is what I'm filming. Couple of Canadian moose. One of the great things, so my final documentary will be an adventure film. I will weave the wisdom that I'm sharing with you in it, and there'll be a lot of wildlife, because especially right now with the pandemic, I'm not spending much time obviously meeting people at all. In fact, I'm socially isolated. I can't meet anybody, which is what I've been for the last 5 years, so it's not a huge adjustment for me, but I do spend a lot of time filming wildlife. And again, it's one of the, I feel very lucky in being a filmmaker. I didn't make a very practical choice financially, but I followed my heart, and it's taken a lot of years, and I am at a place in my life where I can make my living doing what I enjoy doing. But I make sacrifices. In order to make this film, I gave up my home. And I had to spend a year getting rid of all my bills, like whatever those monthly bills were, I had to like get rid of them, so that whatever money I have coming in for, I get paid sometimes to do speaking gigs when I move through communities. I still make a little bit of money monthly from my other work. So all that money can keep me alive on this trail while I make this film. It pays for my food. It pays for the assistance that I need. And I always tell people, we're not what we say we want. We are what we're willing to suffer for. Think about that, because we all say, when you ask people, when you meet them, well, what do you want? Everybody says the same thing, basically. I mean, I want money, I want happiness, I want love. That reveals very little about an individual. If you really want to understand a person, ask them what it is they're willing to suffer for. And I'm willing to suffer for my art. I'm willing to, in order to follow my heart, in order to live the life that I'm wanting to live, I'm willing to give up certain things. And they're not sacrifices. I say what we're willing to suffer for, but I don't actually feel like I'm suffering at all, because I'm doing what I love and it gives me great joy. And it just, I always take people back to that, because we live now so much in our minds, especially with the access to education, which is a wonderful gift for sure, but it takes us out of our hearts and into our brains. We're all consumed with this need to, like, what am I going to do to make money? How am I going to live? I need, and man, you're born, you live, you die. Like, it's like, it's not a dress rehearsal. And so I think in order to be happy in your life, you do have to find a purpose. For me, that purpose was a storyteller. And like I said, I was willing to make, sacrifices in order to be able to do what I love. This is when I first left on the journey, actually day one. And now I'm just going to share a few more stories, a story time, and then I'll pass it over back to Bags, and I'll be willing to answer some questions. So when I left Newfoundland, that was in 2015. It's 1,000 kilometers across the island, and it was really beautiful. And in this particular scene, again, I'm meeting with a group of indigenous women, Mi'kmaq women. And in Mi'kmaq culture, in the Canadian indigenous landscape, there are many different groups of people, but the Mi'kmaq are the ones that are in Atlantic Canada. And the drum, the big drum that they're playing, is normally only played by men. So I was invited to come to this circle, and the women were playing the big drum. And after they'd finished playing the big drum, I asked them, why, it's beautiful to see women playing the big drum, because normally only men play the big drum in Mi'kmaq culture. And I asked them why they were doing that. And they just said, because it's 2021 or because it's the 21st century is what they said to me. And that it was time that they reclaimed their power. What happened in indigenous cultures in Canada with colonization is that the indigenous people really lost a lot of their culture. And when it came back, the way that they kept it going was when the men would go hunting, they would keep some of these traditions alive. But what happened was women lost all their power in these traditions. And so part of what's happening now in indigenous cultures is that the women are trying to get their power back. And so was a drumming circle, and I spent some time there learning from those women. And then I went, this is paddling the Brador Lake. After Newfoundland, I crossed over to Nova Scotia, and I paddled the largest inland sea in the world. It took me 40 days. And when I reached the shores, I was met by the Grand Chief, Ben Sillyboy. And what I learned from him was really profound as well. What he taught me was that the old way, because I thought I was traveling the old way, when I say that, I mean like human powered, right? I was going to like snowshoe, cross-country ski, ride my mountain bike, paddle a canoe, and hike this journey. So I'm about 3 or 4 months into my journey when the Grand Chief meets me on the shore, because he's heard that there's this crazy woman paddling the Brador Lake for 40 days, and he met me at the end there on their territory, and he gifted me a feather, which was a real honor. And he said to me, the old way isn't the way you're traveling. When our ancestors traveled, with every step on the earth, we said, the earth is sacred. The earth is sacred. the earth is sacred. With every stroke of our paddle on the water is sacred. The water is sacred. He said, that's the old way. The old way is what we carried in our hearts. Wow, that was a pretty profound understanding. So since that time, when I'm out, and if I'm paddling by myself for a month and or I'm in the bush by myself for a long period of time, whenever I feel fear, I immediately start saying, if I'm on land, the earth is sacred. The earth is sacred. If I'm on water, the water is sacred. That's how you deal with fear. You don't feed it. Fear can get you killed in these environments. It's a survival mechanism, and it's an important one to acknowledge, but you don't let fear control you. And the way I get rid of fear is I don't feed it. Instead, I feed a different kind of connection. So if I focus on just saying the earth is sacred, or the water is sacred, I'm no longer feeding my fear, I'm feeding something else. And what the indigenous people believe is that by saying those things, and now we're seeing this in science, there are books being written about the consciousness of a forest, so you're putting an energy out there. And he said, if you do this, you will be safe. And I'm 5 years into this journey, and I have gone through storms. I've met bears, some of them nice, some of them not nice. And I'm still here, and I haven't been hurt, and I haven't been injured. Part of that is because of the pace. To me, how fast I achieve something is absolutely meaningless. What does that prove? That's about ego. You know what I mean? Like, who cares how fast you do something? It's what's your connection to the experience that you're having? I'm 55 years old. So, when I was in my 20s and 30s, I could see a lot of value in testing myself. So please, I'm not trying to insult that as a personal goal. If you want to climb a mountain to prove to yourself that you can do it, good for you. There's nothing wrong with that. But as we evolve with this passion, it needs to grow. You need some depth. It's like roots going underground from a tree. It's just, you got to get deeper and deeper. And as we get deeper, we get beneath the need to prove how strong we are into something more eloquent. There's something more meaningful beyond that. So that was the lesson I learned from Grand Chief Ben Sillyboy. This was as I was going through, this is a photograph from when I was snowshoeing on the journey. And here's another image from my tent at night. You can see I got a nice warm fire going out there. I'm in the bush at this point, snowshoeing. This is an image from last summer while I was paddling up to the Arctic Ocean. Really beautiful, beautiful summer night. This is another one of the elders that I met on my journey who taught me about what did Emerson teach me about? Oh, Emerson taught me about the importance of the storyteller. He said, on this lake I was on, Lake Superior, there were 4,000 boats, he said, that had been sunk and were on the bottom of this lake, 4,000 boats. And he said, but you know what? We only remember one. We remember the Fitzgerald because some guy wrote a song about it. And he said, that's the power of the storyteller. Memory. We don't remember. We're all walking amnesiacs. So the only thing that we remember is the things that are immortalized through the power of storytelling and through the power of art. And so that's why he felt that my journey was very important. Because the things that people and his ancestors were sharing with me would be remembered because they would become a part of my story. In addition to 500 Days in the Wild, because the journey is 5 years long and I'm shooting 400 hours of footage for an hour and a half feature film, I've been making TV half hours called the Beacon Projects. And they are, because I spend days with some of these elders in my feature film, they might only be in the film for 3 or 4 minutes each. But I felt that they deserved a lot more space. So we've been creating TV half hours just about the elders and the stories they share and the wisdom they share. And the first one is called Traditional Knowledge and the Water Grandmother. And this is a beautiful quote from her, because a lot of people don't really understand what I mean when I say indigenous knowledge. And like she says, indigenous knowledge comes from our earth, our mother. It comes from our dreams and comes from our visions. And again, we're such a linear with the advent of technology and science. And again, these are great things, but we need balance, and we forget the value of things that are not 1 + 1 = 2, and things like intuition. And when you're in danger and you're in the mountain, I don't know about anybody else, but I've always known the danger was happening seconds before the avalanche, like you get a feeling, an intuition, and learning how to honor that and to connect to that. And so that's part of what she's talking about here with indigenous knowledge as well. This is just a shot when I'm filming there. And this is a quote, and I wanted to read it today. If I can get rid of see if I can move this around here. Whoops. Part of it's cut off for me, but you guys can read it. Our roots are in the dark. The earth is our country. Why did we look up for blessing instead of around and down? What hope we have lies there. Not in the sky full of orbiting spy eyes and weaponry, but in the earth we have looked down upon. Not from above, but from below. Not in the light that blinds, but in the dark that nourishes, where human beings grow human souls. For me, that quote is the essence of what it is I'm trying to convey in my film. And I use the adventure to make it exciting and funny and energetic. But at the core of it, there's something much deeper than my ego to prove that if I do this, I'll be the first person to have done that trail. But who cares? There'll be many, many more after me, and they'll all do the journey in their own way, and they'll all do it differently. What matters is something is how that journey will have changed me, and how the kind of story that I can tell to hopefully inspire other people to make those journeys themselves. These are a few other images from my journey. These are just the books that I've written based on every time I make a documentary, I also write a book. For those of you who are watching today that are also filmmakers or writers, really important to try to conceptualize of your stories on multi-platforms. So I write a book, I make a documentary, I do social media, multi-platforming projects. And those are the links to my social media. And at this point, I am going to bring it back to you, Bex.
I'm still thrilled looking at all the glimpses of your journey, and especially the insights that you provided about how the traditional knowledge is very important. Most of the time, science and technology also can fail, but you can only survive with the traditional knowledge that you have. So, Dee, while your session was going on, we had about 32 people here and around 64 on YouTube following this entire journey. So we've shortlisted few questions from what we've got here and there. So I'm going to shoot with the first question. So Anuja wants to know about how you managed all your expenses for this entire journey.
So like I said, I gave up all if you think about what we work for, we work to pay our rent or our mortgage or whatever, right? So when you get rid of those things, then you're not working to pay for those things. Because I'm 30 years into my career now, I still make dividends, very small dividends, but dividends from my books and my other films. So cumulatively, I can make enough money a month that I can pay for my food. I own my camera gear. The trail, I'm usually in a tent. This is an exception. This is, a reaction to the pandemic, and that's the other thing we learn when we go on these adventures is the importance of not being rigid. You have to always adapt to the circumstances that are unfolding around you, and rigidity will result in failure. You have to be able to adapt, and that's what I'm doing right now by being in this van and talking to you, is adapting to the circumstances. So I gave up those bills in order to come out here. My home has been this trail for the last 5 years. I don't have a house that I fall back to right now. You know what I mean? I will, once I'm done this journey, get a home again, but right now I don't. So that's partially how I finance this journey. I also do speaking engagements. I also do fundraising. There's going to be a link that's shared with everybody. We're just starting a Patreon page, so people will be able to have access to sort of more of the filmmaking information and the back sort of behind the scenes stuff for $3 a month. And then that gets invested into my journey. People have done fundraisers for me. I have gotten 2 small grants. I got a grant, a Canada Council grant and a Royal Canadian Geographic Society grant. Those help as well. And really, once you're out here, your expenses are your food, right? That's it. I'm not paying hydro. I'm not paying all the, you know what I mean? I'm not paying rent. So I was willing to give up those things in order to be able to make this film. And I do make my films as an independent. I don't make them. I make them first and then I sell them. And that's because I approach it more as an artist than a commercial artist. And I feel like from a perspective of integrity, I need to do it that way. And so once I'm done, then and the film comes out, then I'm able to survive based on just touring the film and writing a book and then touring the book. And then that'll be my revenue for a couple of years on the back end. But that's how I make them. And I'll also tell you that when I left on this journey, I didn't go, where's all the money that I'm going to need to do the journey? And where's all the money I'm going to need to make the film? I just put one foot in front of the other, you know, just deal with a day by day. And then slowly you reach the top of a big mountain. And Everest is a great metaphor because every big goal we have in our life is like an Everest, right? It's this lofty concept. It seems so far away, but when we break it down into steps, it becomes attainable and you're not overwhelmed. So that would be the other thing is like, you don't have to have it all figured out in order to embark on something, you know, deal with what you need right now and then focus on the next step as you go along.
Perfect.
There you go.
Thank you, Bags, for that question. And Dianne, very well answered. Overall, an amazing presentation. And thank you for taking us through this story. So,
yes, thank you.
So we've seen what all you've been doing, and you've told us that you're an amazing storyteller, and we can see that through your amazing pictures as well as the videos that you've made, documentaries, movies, books, and you talking to people. That's how you're telling the stories. So we see you as an amazing storyteller, but the question from Dinky is, do you feel that it was purpose or were you destined to be a storyteller? What's your answer for that?
I would say yes. Like everybody, I came out of high school, I went to university. I thought I wanted to be a lawyer. And I thought I wanted to be a lawyer because it would afford, like, it seemed like a job with prestige and that I would be able to make a certain amount of money. And I wanted to make my parents happy. And so like every other not every other teenager, but like a lot of teenagers and a lot of young adults, those were my ideas. And then I realized I wasn't happy, in my early 20s. It was like it wasn't fulfilling me at all. And so I let it all go. And at that point, I got on my mountain bike and I rode down to Mexico on my mountain bike, and I slept in my tent. And every night, just sort of sat with, well, what's my purpose? Like, what can I do? And then I started making a list of, well, what makes me happy? What are the things that I enjoy doing? I love nature. I love adventure. I love challenging myself. And I've always loved storytelling in all its forms. At that point, I wasn't a photographer. I wasn't a filmmaker. I was such a serious student that I took Latin instead of art. Who does that? Anyway, so I realized I got to get, what are the things that I love? So I went right back to when I was 5 years old. Like, okay, what did you love when you were 5? What did you love? What are the things that you do where time just slips by like water, like just, hours go by, it feels like minutes. And how can I bring those things together in order to make a living? And I didn't have all the answers. Like when I came home from that journey, I went back to school and studied journalism. And then I got into journalism and I went, oh my God, what a mistake. This is not what I want to do. Like, this is just a business. Like, I don't get to write about what I want. It's like, I was pretty naive going into journalism school, but I picked up a camera because I had to take one class in journalism school on photojournalism. Well, when I picked up that camera, I went and covered, I think it was like the first Iraqi war in 1990s or something. And there was a big demonstration happening in Vancouver, an anti-war protest. So I grabbed this camera and I went down. Hours went by. Like, I didn't take one note. All I did was take pictures. That night I went back to the school. I asked the security guard to let me into the school. I went down into the dark room. I opened up a book and I taught myself how to soup this film, make some prints, and boom, I was off and running. So I left journalism school. I got a job as a photojournalist and I started from there. I started from the photojournalism and then I started doing some feature writing, and then the documentary making was just bringing the stories and the photographs together. And so by following my heart, one thing led to another, and I find myself here where I am today, where I'm doing all of these things in order to survive. And basically every experience I've ever had in my life is woven together in order for me to be able to do what I'm doing right now. So I think that's the thing about following your passions in life, is that they are like a map to your purpose. Your passions are a map to your purpose if you can honor them and listen to them and give yourself. I mean, the greatest gift you can give yourself is your life, is investing in yourself. So yeah, I gave myself that gift, basically.
Thank you, Dianne. Bags, if I can shoot one more question before we proceed. She was referring to maps, and I wanted to discuss on that earlier. We had this discussion about the maps. So yes, I had a scenario where GPS was introduced, and we were trekking in zero visibility, and the GPS did suggest that you have to take 20 steps, and after that you have to take a left turn. But when we stepped out, after 3 steps, we had 1,000 feet fall. So how accurate are maps, and what do you follow as a general protocol to navigate?
It's a really good question. Really good question. And my answer to you, I've had similar experiences where the GPS has actually put me in danger. It's also on many other days been a good friend and bailed me out of danger. So what I say is I do both. I have paper maps and I have a GPS. And this goes back to the same concept thematically as we've been talking about, this idea of traditional knowledge with the science and the technology. You need both. You don't want to lose, carry a compass, learn how to use a compass, even though you can use your cell phone or you can do these other things, learn these traditional ways of navigating as well. Because when you're out there, what happens if your GPS goes off the side of your canoe, or you get to your camping spot at the end of hiking at the end of the day and you start going, where's my GPS? I lost it. So, you don't want to leave yourself, open to those kinds of circumstances. So what I always do is I compare. I have my GPS and I have a paper map, and the two of them coexist every day for me. And at the end of the day, I'm making, I mark on the paper map the information from the GPS. So if I lose my technology, or like in my lesson from the Arctic, when we hit a hurricane at -80, all that technology stops working, and especially for you mountaineers, right? You get up to 20,000, 25,000 feet. Like, you can't always rely on that technology. You better have a backup, and that backup better be in here. So when you have that information within yourself, you can't lose it, So I use both, and I recommend to everybody to do so. Like, use the greatest and the latest in technology with the GPS, but also have paper maps, have a compass, understand both ways of navigating in the world.
Fantastic. Bags over to you.
Okay, so we are running short of time, so I'm just going to combine all the remaining questions and put them into one. So
okay.
Our viewers want to know, what food did you consume on your journey? What are the challenges that you faced on your journey? And Maithili ma'am wants to know, what was the motivation for you to start this journey?
Okay.
So food, challenges, and motivation.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll start with food. Food has evolved as the journey has gone. Once you start going on journeys like this, it's not like you can just run to the store and buy a couple of meals that you just add water to. You have to think in terms of longer. Lots of times we're packing, like last summer, we were packing and thinking about food for 5 months, right? So basically you create a menu and then it's kind of, gets repeated. But breakfasts were like hot oatmeal, pancakes that you just add water to in order to cook, granola, and dried powdered, like you can make your own granola with dried powdered milk and then just add water to it, or often add hot water to it. Sometimes it can have dehydrated fruit. The only time I cook is in the morning and in the evening. My lunches are always like on the go. I always have a snack bag, and that snack bag will be nuts and dried fruit and usually some chocolate, let's be real. So that's keeping, and instead of eating like a meal every hour or so, I'm throwing a couple handfuls of these nuts and dried fruit just to keep my energy going. And then at the end of the day, there's a dinner. When you're out in the wild, when you're out in the bush, you never cook dinner where you're going to camp. That's bad news. It's going to bring animals into your camp. So you do this thing, they call it cowboy camping. So on the river last summer, we would look for a place at like 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock at night, where we could pull over on a sandbar or something on the river or on the lakes and make dinner, clean up, get back in the canoe, paddle for another couple hours, then set up camp. So we never ate dinner at our camp. In the morning, when you're striking your camp, you can eat breakfast, but you know what I mean? Then you're leaving. And that's part of the way that you navigate the wildlife thing. Because animals in nature are going to be drawn to the smell of your cooking food. And dinners are often just like pasta. I always carry like fresh garlic with me and fresh ginger. So I'm throwing that into whatever. But yeah, mostly pasta or noodles or quesadillas with refried beans. Quesadillas pack well, they last a long time. The tortillas or stuff like that. And then I make bannock, which is just flour and water that you fry up in a pan. It's kind of like flatbread or something like that. And a lot of soups, that kind of thing. So that's your food answer. As far as challenges, challenges were everything from my own fear. I mean, when I left, I just turned 50. I'd never been alone in the wilderness before for any length of time. I'd done short stints, but nothing like this. And so naturally, as a woman being alone, it's hard for us not to be afraid. We're socially conditioned for that. So I had to combat my own fear. And there's no easy way to deal with fear except to face it. I like to tell people, I don't know if you've ever seen The Wizard of Oz, but fear is like that little man behind the curtain. It has a big shadow, but once you get to the source of it, it's actually just a small little bird. It looks like a dragon, but it's actually just a small little bird. And our fear is very much like that. We need to confront it. Otherwise, it's a limitation to our growth, And so I would say fear was one of my biggest challenges. And now 5 years into the journey, I don't have those fears as much because I've been out here for so long and they haven't been substantiated. And all the things that I was afraid of have happened and I've been able to navigate through it safely. Biggest challenge. And then after that, it's just the force of Mother Nature. I mean, the challenges are the hurricanes, the windstorms, the snowstorms, the freezing, the ice, the adverse conditions of nature. But the way that I've navigated safely through that is I don't fight nature. I'm not out here to conquer her. I'm out here. I respect her. I work with her. And if it's really bad, I stay in my tent, especially on water. When you're on a solo paddle for 4 or 5 months, there's nobody that's going to come and bail you out if you make a mistake. So if it's really windy and the waves are high, then I sit on shore, I make food, I read my book, I write in my journal, I do some filming, I sleep, I meditate, I look after myself, and I wait for the weather to calm down. Because, if you go out there and you're battling against the waves, you're going to travel in a whole day what I can travel in 20 minutes in flat water. So it's not an efficient use of my energy. And I think that's why a lot of people get in trouble on these adventures, is because they have time limits, and some of it can't be avoided. Like on Everest, you know, it's a small window, and you get a small chance to get to the top, and you either make it in that time or you don't. On this journey, I don't have that kind of. It's not that kind of circumstance. The challenge for this journey is its length. It's the commitment of time and the need to stay healthy and not to burn out, right? Like it's endurance. And so it's about finding that cadence. So anyway, I work with nature. I don't work against her, you know, and I wait for the right weather to move, and I'm patient. And it's taken me a lot of years to learn that patience, because before I was more like a horse frothing at the mouth, just like, let me go. I gotta get going. I gotta get going. So learning how to calm that down has been a big important part. So those are some of my challenges. That's the food I ate. And as far as motivation, my motivation is this is what I do for a living, is I make films and I write books on adventures. Like I said, I'd been to Everest, I'd been to the Arctic, and now I'm on the longest trail in the world. But I was also drawn to a story that had this interplay of traditional knowledge and science and technology, just like Everest and just like this land in the North Pole. Like I'm looking for those kinds of stories, and that's what drew me to it. And I'm following my heart. If I conceptualized of these ideas in my mind, I might burn out on them. But when they come from here, that's what keeps you going. And I still have the same fascination and love for this journey that I had 5 years ago. So that's the benefit of staying true to yourself and staying sincere to your journey.
Perfect. Bags, if you can take one final question and then head towards the valedictory.
I think we'll just head ahead because we're really running out of time.
Okay. I think this question was a valid one because of the COVID scenario. So probably a small answer, Dianne, the one we discussed.
Okay, my best.
Yeah. So yesterday we did discuss about you filming more of wildlife of late. So when we started having this lockdown, we realized birds and animals here were extremely confused and making loud noises in the morning. So they were not sure on why we were all staying indoors or where we were. So have you noticed any special behavior or different behavior from animals of late?
Well, I mean, you see more of them right now because we are staying inside. I mean, most of us. I mean, I'm still on this journey because I'm socially isolated for 5 years out here anyway. So it hasn't really been a big change to me. But no, I haven't noticed a change. Like I tell people, we are the predators, right? I mean, we say, oh, in nature, I'm afraid of the animals. Well, every single animal is afraid of us for good reason, because between our vehicles that kill like hundreds of thousands of them every year, millions of them globally, and then the hunting and everything else that we do. So, and animals have memory. I mean, it's not like, they know to avoid us. So I think what you're hearing is those sounds probably were always there, but the hum of our industrialized society is quieted down a little bit so we can actually hear these things. And also, like, we were talking about this briefly yesterday, but it's interesting to me that we have a pandemic that's infecting our lungs, right? And at the same time, while the industrial hum is taking a break a little bit, what we're seeing is the air quality is improving around our planet right now. And so I think maybe that's what they're reacting to too, is the fact that we can all breathe a little better right now. But no, I haven't seen any adverse behavior in animals at all. I just see more of them. And that's because they just have more space to take up than they normally do, because vast majority of people are at home right now.
Brilliant answer, Dianne.
That's amazing to know, Lee. That's really brilliant. So
Bags, we're not able to hear you.
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, it's better.
Yes.
Okay, so without any further delay, with all our collaborators that we've had, I request Rahul Nair on behalf of Decathlon Brigade Road just to share a couple of his learnings from this session. Can we unmute Rahul Nair?
Rahul, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. I hope everyone can hear me. Uh, First of all, a big thanks to Dianne. The session was wonderful. And thank you for taking the time in this situation and sharing it with our users. So we are part of Decathlon Brigade Route team, and we are here to make sure that our users are satisfied. So in terms of Zoom video conference, in terms of YouTube, we are here to make sure all such experience like great personalities like you to reach out to more and more people. So thank you, Dan, for joining, and it is a lot of inspiration for each one of us to maybe think, okay, this is what we have to think forward and go in the direction that, okay, it's not only work, you can have a different set of lifestyle like this. So definitely it's a big inspiration for us, and from the Brigade Road team of Decathlon, a big thank you, and hope to see you again, and we collaborate in more and more sessions. Thank you, Dan. Thank you for the session.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. It's been a real honor, and like I said, I will never say no to bags. So you just anytime she reaches out to me, my answer will always be yes. So it's been a real honor to share with you today. Thank you.
Super. Thank you.
So thank you so much, Dee. And on behalf of Rotary and Rotaract District 3190, I would like to invite our Krishna Arjun to just share his experience about the session.
Perfect. Thanks, Bags. Dianne, it was wonderful the way you shared your story with us. I know the time is not sufficient, but you still managed to give us an idea in a nutshell. And we wish you the very best in all your adventures. And this particular event, I would like to thank Bags especially for reaching out to us and helping us collaborate, and also MD College, Decathlon. We're very happy to collaborate at any given point of time with these lovely experiences. I think we can all learn and we can all be better individuals. And we all feel that we are leading difficult lives, but only when we hear stories about these lovely adventurers that we realize that there's a different adventure waiting for all of us. So yes, let's become better adventurers. We'll all wait for the lockdown to settle in and the situation to get better. And this I think has been an eye opener, and people are waiting to get out and probably do some joint adventures with you, Dianne. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And moving to so D, especially we had a lot of professors from Maharshi Dayanand College attending this session. So now I would request Maitri ma'am from MD College to please share her experience regarding this session.
Yeah, it was wonderful listening to you, madam. We are so happy to collaborate with Bhageshri in this group, and we are very happy that you're really, having a lot of adventures. And when you were talking, I really felt that I missed quite a lot in my life. That I didn't go into these kind of adventures, and we always used to. Share a lot with Bhageshri. She used to come and tell us about her adventures, and that used to really inspire us a lot. Thank you very much for collaborating with us, and wish you all success in all your
thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
very much, Maitli ma'am. I would now like to request Siddeshwara to kindly propose the vote of thanks for this event. And also, Dee, we have something made up for you, especially since it's the digital era now. I really need to share this, and that's the way probably we could just thank you. I mean, we can't think of any better way than this. So thank you so much, Dee. Siddesh, over to Sidhu for the vote of thanks.
Thank you very much. That's very thoughtful of you. And yes, great. I'll find a way to print it out and get it up here in the support vehicle.
Thank you, Bhagya. So
Sidhu, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Bhagya. Good evening, all. I deem to a great honor and privilege to propose the vote of the thanks on this memorable occasions on behalf of the Decathlon Sports India Private Limited, Brigade Road Store. First and foremost, I thank our special guest, Mr. Dianne, who took the time out of this wonderful occasion and made everyone motivated by her inspiration story. I would like to thanks the following peoples to DG Nagendra Prasad, District Governor election, then Dr. Chaya Panse, Principal of the Maharshi Dayanand College, Shashi, respective from the District Rotra, then Bhagya, Krishna Arjun, Sijo, Kajol, and the Abhishek who organized this event for all of us. And also the big thanks to all the participants who attend this session and which energy and participant, because without you all event wouldn't have been a successful ones. So thank you, Dana. So it's a wonderful inspiration, especially for me. And it's like one day I will definitely join you. And yeah, so it's like for inspiration for each and everyone, those are the youngsters and in this generation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And special thanks to our DJs Arun, who helped us with the tech today, and Diana, Dianne, Bhagya, Bharti Mani, the entire fraternity from Decathlon, as well as MD College, Rotary and Rotrack. Thank you everyone for joining in today. It's been
And
wonderful.
I shouldn't miss this opportunity. Sijo, I have unmuted you. So Dianne, all the entire communication, designing part and registering the event and all, it was all taken care by Sijo. So a big thanks to Sijo. Also, Sijo, you're unmuted. So thank you so much for making this possible for all of us.
Thank you, Bhagya. Thank you.
All right. So Dee, thank you so much once again. I mean, I'm short of words to express my gratitude, but yes, as Siddheshwara rightly summarized, everybody who's been involved in this, thank you so much for sharing your lovely insights about life. I'm sure it's going to unfold a lot of new paths for us and even towards mankind. So thank you so much, everyone.
Bhagya, there's a request for taking a group picture, at least for Zoom. We can't take pictures of people watching on YouTube. So we'll just quickly get into the grid view. Everyone switch on your video. Let's
Everybody,
take
please switch on your videos.
Let's take a groupie with Dianne.
It's a whole new world.
Yes.
Group photo on Zoom. Here we go. Okay.
All right. Going live in 3, 2, 1.
Good job, Bhagya. Thank you, Dianne. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much. This is the first time I've ever done a presentation on Zoom. And like I said, hooked up to solar power and using a phone as a hotspot. And it was all very new for me. I've never done a presentation like this before. So thank you for encouraging me to grow and teaching me new things. Thank you.
Anytime, Dianne. See you on the other side.
Bet. Take care, everybody.
Namaste.
Namaste.
Bye, Dee.
Bye, sweetheart.
Thank you.